The authors of a new book. In this new book, they allege that steps were taken to conceal former President Joe Biden's vast diminishing health while he was in office. Journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson say they spoke to more than 200 people for this book, many people within the Biden administration and the larger Democratic Party. The result is called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. It is out today. Within that book, sources describe Biden's struggle to remember the names of longtime associates going back to 2019 and an increased reliance on note cards and scripted meetings, even with his own cabinet members. This comes just after, of course, the announcement yesterday of former President Biden battling prostate cancer. We're now joined by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson here for their very first TV interview about the book. Gentlemen, good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. I mentioned the prostate cancer. I think the announcement was Friday, but we were talking about it yesterday. Two things off the top. First, we all are sympathetic to the Biden family.
100%.
This is a tough fight. We wish them the absolute best.
Yeah.
Well said.
Second, we'll talk about whether the Washington press corps should have done more and known more, shared more during the administration. But for now, let's just talk about the heart of the book itself. At times, this president was almost completely out of it, gone, spent. And it raises the question of who was running the country at those moments. Was there a protocol in place? And then also, what was the nature of the cover-up? Can you describe it, Jake?
So first of all, let me just say, as you said, our hearts go out to President Biden and his family in this fight against prostate cancer. One of the things that this news does, I think, is highlight how difficult health issues are for reporters to cover, because these are the most sensitive, personal, intrusive questions that you can ask. So separately, on what we uncovered in our book, these are difficult questions to ask people in the White House about. And we were repeatedly, Alex was very aggressive covering this as a White House reporter, we were repeatedly lied to by people in the White House who were always saying, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. After the election, Alex and I said, we need to find out what really happened, because that was just crazy. What did the American people just go through? And we talked to more than 200 Democratic insiders, all of these interviews, almost all of them, after the election. And what we found out was shocking, just the degree to which he was addled increasingly. There were almost like two Bidens, a fine Biden, the one you saw on the reg in 2020, and a non-functioning Biden.
So, but did you guys think the aides were being deceitful, or did you think that they really believed that he was going to be okay, Alex, and he would be able to do the job?
I think some of the early steps were done with innocent enough reasons. You want your principal to look good. But as his diminishment increased, some of those actions became increasingly deceitful. Because the fact is that the Biden that we saw on the debate stage last June, he had other moments like that behind the scenes, and increasingly so. And they started structuring his schedule, his public schedule, to make sure that the public didn't see it. And even some people inside their own administration, their own White House, their own cabinet, did not see this. They shielded him both from public view and from...
As we all know, there's a difference between the outer rung and then your inner circle.
Yeah.
And when it comes to proximity, the former First Lady, Joe Biden, is the closest to him.
Yeah.
Do you believe that she was complicit in this cover-up?
I think the main people complicit in hiding the non-functioning Biden were President Biden, First Lady Biden, Hunter Biden, and then his immediate circle of aides that other people in the White House called the Politburo, Mike Donnellan, Steve Ricchetti, and some others. They were the ones who saw President Biden every day, up close and personal, and whether they were lying to themselves and everybody else or just everybody else.
And that is a big question.
Right.
It's a huge question.
I agree.
So one of those aides, Ricchetti, referred us to the Biden team statement, which is there's nothing in this book that shows Joe Biden failed to do his job, nor did they prove their allegation that there was a cover-up or conspiracy. Nowhere do they show that our national security was threatened or President Biden wasn't otherwise engaged in the important matters of the presidency. But I actually feel you do show.
I think we do. I don't think he's read the book.
If he's not meeting with cabinet members, if they don't have direct access to him, if he sometimes lights out at 5:15 or dinner at 4:30, as you reported even during the administration, I do genuinely wonder if something had occurred of national concern, who was making the decisions at that point?
Well, I'll just say, we didn't make this up. The fact is that people inside the administration told us this, that they did not, we had multiple cabinet members that said if there had been a crisis, especially in 2024, late in the middle of the night, they did not have confidence that Joe Biden would necessarily be up to that task. And as a result, you sort of have the institutional aspects of the presidency that would have probably, tried to take hold.
But critics are saying to both of you guys, listen, if you knew this information, you said you didn't get it until after the election.
Right.
We're questioning that because you all both are so well sourced. So that's raising some questions. Why didn't you share it before, as soon as you got it, as opposed to gathering all the information, then putting it out in a book that you will undoubtedly profit from?
Well, I think
the optics people say don't look good for both.
So I would take issue with that because, first of all, if you know me or Alex, you know that if we had learned in real time that President Biden didn't recognize George Clooney at that 2024, at that June 2024
yeah, we didn't
fundraiser,
hear that in real time.
we would have reported it. That's a huge scoop. I mean, the way that everybody here on this set, the way all of us are wired is we want to be the first ones to break the story. We would have done it in a second. But that said, there was something about writing a book after the election that I thought was an important way to do this in terms of telling the whole story of how this all happened. And we started writing the book in November and it's May. We got it out as soon as we could. But people in the administration who covered this up from the American people, they justified this to themselves by saying, oh, this threat of Donald Trump, it's an existential threat to the country. So this justifies what we're doing. Once that threat was done, because Trump won, they were willing to talk.
You'll both be back for the 9 o'clock hour. We'll see you then. Meantime, goodbye for now. Original Sin out today. Buy it. We'll talk more in the next hour.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
We are back, 8:30 CBS Mornings. Time for Talk at the Table, but as you see, it's a picture of the White House. It's our show. We've decided to keep talking at this table with our two guests from the last segment, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, authors of Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again, the book everyone is talking about right now. So let's keep talking about it. In the break, Jake, we were going into more detail about the national security implications of the president's condition and him being in the White House. Pick that up.
Well, the Biden people keep saying that there's never been a decision or nothing was impacted on the national security front because of what we report in terms of how much he was diminished. But that's not accurate if you read the book, and I know you three did. There are senators who express concern in the book about what they're seeing. Senator Mark Warner, top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, has a conversation with the President Biden, about them releasing some terrorists from Gitmo, and he's concerned because he doesn't think Biden understands what they're talking about. There's another scene where Senator Bennett from Colorado is at the White House for an immigration event, and Biden is so addled and out of it, he leaves thinking, well, this is why our immigration policy is such a mess. The president is not capable of handling the portfolio. And whatever you think of Trump or Obama and how they did it, they at least were able to manage the competing interests, and Biden can't.
But the American people were certainly concerned, too. I mean, time after time, the polls showed the numbers were dropping, his age, his cognitive decline. But many times in the book, you kept talking to people who said, this reminds me of my dad. This reminds me of my grandmother, my grandfather. There's one case where a sibling says, listen, Mom is fine. And her brother says, well, how long did you talk to her? Well, 30 minutes. Well, anybody can do anything for 30 minutes.
So Biden if it's not do 10 minutes with donors, according to the book.
Exactly right. But if it's not a cover-up, it's certainly problematic behavior. So what do you want people to do with this?
Well, I'd say two things. One is I think it speaks to that this is a human story, and Democratic elites caught up to the voters. And I think the reason is, to your point, because every person in America has seen this. But this just happened on the biggest possible stage with the biggest possible consequence. In terms of what can be done, I think there should be a system of making sure that there are, under oath health disclosures of every single president, just given the power that we invest in this single person.
So, Jake, you mentioned President Trump. After writing a book like this, I would assume it gives you a keen eye when it comes to the cognitive and physical declination of some of our political leaders. And you guys are well-sourced, as Gayle mentioned. What are you hearing? What are you seeing when it comes to our current president, Trump?
We don't see any evidence of any sort of deterioration cognitively. I think the questions about Trump that have always been raised have to do with his personality, which is something that is very out and in the open to the voters. But to pick up on Alex's point, whether you're talking about President Biden, President Trump, or President Gayle King, I think that
choose another name.
The transparency.
The transparency is so important. It is not required. Presidents do not have to give their health records to the American people,
and that needs to change.
And it's unacceptable. After this, there's no way that the American people should tolerate this ever again. There needs to be a law on the books requiring full health disclosures, full health, under oath, as Alex said.
Well, let's hope the doctors tell the truth,
that
too.
Seems to
well, that's why it has to be under oath. That's why it has to be under oath.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But
because the doctors are not always fully transparent.
Right, but for that to happen, a law would have to be passed, Congress would have to get on board, and Democrats would have to admit that they were wrong and that there was some sort of cover-up here. Do you see that happening?
Well, they're having trouble right now. You're seeing a few Democrats go and say, well, at least he shouldn't have run again. The problem is there's a lot of tape with them basically going out there and saying Joe Biden is fine.
Yeah, and but we are starting to see, especially people in the 2028 realm, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, admitting, of course, he had some cognitive decline about President Biden. So they are starting to reckon with this. How important this is going to be to the American people, I don't know. But I do think that this is not unlike the Iraq War was for Republicans in the earlier part of the century. This is something that happened that everybody understands was a mistake. Everybody acknowledges it in their gut. The American people were there well before the media or the politicos. And I do think that there's just a certain... David Plouffe, who was Obama's campaign manager, worked for Kamala Harris, he said, this is a lesson for everybody in politics. We can't ever tell the voters again that they're not seeing what they are seeing with their own eyes.
Right.
Agree.
All right, Jake and Alex, we appreciate you sticking around. You have invaded our Talk of the Table segment, so now you get the special treat of sticking around for Gayle's story.
Yes,
all right.
Yeah.